Um, that's the
There we
proof
go.
that it's going.
Okay, well, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Eric.
Everybody hear me okay? We're gonna do this a little differently this time with the cordless mic. I don't have anything more intelligent to add to the conversation, but my name's Eric. We've got Jeff Horchoff speaking for us today, aka Mr. Ed. I don't think he needs any more introduction than that, but we're zooming in. And he'll give a presentation. I'm not sure, Jeff, how much time you plan on speaking to us, but if there's time for questions at the end, we'll just pass around this cordless mic so that, because when folks in the back try to ask questions in the past, we've tried to do this, it's very difficult for the microphone up here to pick it up. So we're really grateful to have this awesome turnout today, and I'll just go ahead and hand it over to Jeff.
Now I'm nervous. Well, thank y'all for inviting me to y'all's meeting today. And where again are you all located?
Just right at the edge of Kansas City.
Okay. Well, I really don't know where Kansas City is. I know it's north of me somewhere.
Well, you know where Wreck-It Ralph went to Branson?
Yeah,
Okay, we're straight north of Branson there about.
I know where Branson. I used to go to Eureka Springs about 5 or 6 times a year, and we'd trip over to Branson, make a run up there, do a lot of fishing on the White River. Oh, it was wonderful.
You have to
But
come back.
what's that?
You have to come back.
Oh yeah, I'm planning on it. I am planning on it. So I really don't have like anything to talk about, nothing scheduled, and I'd really rather just field some questions. I don't mind talking about anything in general. I don't my philosophy on keeping bees is more a you need to keep bees the way that you feel comfortable keeping bees. No one should dictate to you, and this is my opinion, no one should dictate you how to keep your bees. If you want to treat your bees, you should be able to treat your bees. If you don't want to treat your bees, you shouldn't have to be obligated to treat your bees. If you want to go renegade and don't use a regular beehive, but put some bees in a garbage can and raise them that way, more power to you. You have to understand that the bee business is just that. It's a business. And they love dictating to new people or people who are unaware of bees how they should do it. And I agree that you need to have some knowledge of keeping bees, but that's not even required either, because for almost 10 years of my beekeeping career, I didn't know nothing about bees. I had bees and they were out in the yard, and once a year I'd go out there and keep my fingers crossed, and maybe I'd get honey on them. And that, I didn't know nothing about it, but they were out there and they did fine. And so it's not necessary to follow guidelines on keeping bees. What is necessary is for you individually to find methods, ways of doing bees that fit into your way of life. And I'm not a big fan of the word beekeeper. I'm a more believer of a bee steward, that the bees are God's creation, and as is the rest of the world. And in truth, we're just stewards of what we have. They're not ours because they were gifted from God, and we're just like in charge of them. They're not really ours because we're going to die anyway. So somebody else is going to get them. And so we're just stewards. And so I apply that philosophy of stewardship to bees, that the bees aren't mine, and they really aren't mine. They belong to the monks. I just take care of them. So it's one of the advantages I have. They really aren't my bees, even though every one of those bees was brought there because of my efforts. but it's still, I think it's a valid philosophy in that having bees does make you responsible to a degree of caring for the bees, but it doesn't, you are not responsible for the bees in the sense that if the bees should die, not because of you, but other weather, insects, starvation, some things can be avoided. You can avoid, you do things that will enhance the bees' chances of living. But for the most part, my bees are on their own. I catch them, I bring them to the abbey, I set them up to the best of what I know their needs will be. And after that, boom, they're on their own. I mean, I may not go out and visit my bees. Some of them, they don't get but maybe 2 or 3 visits from me a year. And that's it. And we do pretty good with our bees. I don't treat. I've got an extremely large, lazy side to my nature. And so the less work that I'm required to do, the happier a guy I am. So treating is just not an option, because that would mean there's more work for me to do. Not only would be there more work for me to do, there'd be more expense to it. I'm not interested in work or expense. And as it turns out, our annual losses are even less than the national losses. Last year, we were about 35% losses for the year. And the nationals anywhere from 35 to 50% or more. And so we don't treat, and our losses are below. Now, I will say that I believe that the area of the United States that we live in here in Southeast Louisiana, we're kind of like in a ecological bubble. And in the sense that we have tremendous habitat for bees. We have, not only do we have tremendous habitat, but we have tremendous resources for the bees. That is natural, occurring, blooming plants. And so the likelihood of bees, their chances of being able to survive in this area, the climate, the weather, the food source, the areas that they can actually dwell in, all these things are really conducive for bee growth. And so I consider myself blessed to be able to live in an area where keeping bees is not really that much of a challenge. I do not deal with what you all deal with, that nasty cold. I don't like cold, so I can understand why the bees don't either. It's just bad. So yeah, we do have hurricanes, but even for the hurricanes, bees are on their own. By that time of year, hurricane season is generally August, the big bad time. It starts at the end of June, but from mid-August to end of September is our peak hurricane season. And by that time, our hives are the heaviest they are during the year. So I always figure that with the weight of the hives, at least it's not going to get blown over or blown away if some wind should come. Now, if a branch or tree falls on them, that's a different story. But in all the years that I've been doing the bees, I've yet to lose one hive because of a hurricane. And I don't do anything to secure our hives. Whereas in the wintertime, our winters are so mild here. Our bees really fly 365 days a year. Even in our coldest weather, which might be in the teens, maybe, even on those days, it's going to warm up to above freezing. Probably in the 35 to 40 degree range, and our bees can fly almost all year round, and they do. We probably only have about, I'm guessing, probably about 25, no more than 30 days of temperature below 32 degrees a year. And that's, our coldest month is really mid-January to mid-February. That's the coldest time frame. And And even at that time, our bees are already coming out. She's laying, and I've already caught swarms here. February the 3rd, I've caught swarms. So our bees swarm early, and so we have a very early spring, and we have our nectar flow. It starts generally, well, even in January. We have blooming trees in January. So our red maple and our willow, they'll start blooming almost, you can set your clock to it. It's going to be the end of the first week of January. You're going to start seeing blooms. Yes, Mona. You're going to start seeing blooms on the willow and the red maple, the swamp maple. Bees are already bringing in the pollen. I do feed pollen substitute in December. I start putting it out, and they'll take it until that first nectar bloom or pollen bloom comes in. Because once it comes in, they're off that pollen. They don't want that. They want the real stuff. So our first bloom starts around January, and we have the main ones are that maple and that willow, and they'll go in probably about till mid-February, and by then we're starting having residual, like our blackberries are going to start coming in, and then let's see, February and March. By March we have pear trees. So March is already springtime for us. So we got pears blooming. There's a lot of things blooming early on. Now, as I'm talking, if you want to ask me something, we don't have any guidelines. Just like raise your hand, and Eric will be happy to carry that mic over to you so I can hear what you're going to ask me. But our blooms, our year starts early, and my way of keeping ahead of everything is I'm in my bee boxes right around mid-February. I'm going in there. Now this year was totally different. We were 3 weeks behind this year, but normally by mid-February, I'm already going into my boxes because I can find swarm cells in there already. And that's how I love to make my splits, is using my queen cells, my swarm cells for my bees. And that's my favorite way. And I wouldn't recommend it to people to do that because it's very risky, but man, it works so good. And I want to get my bees split as early as I can. I really want to have it done by the middle of March, the end of March. I want to be finished my splits because April and May, the hives are now building up. My splits are done, hives are building up, the number of bees are building up. And by January, February, March, April, by end of April, I'm already throwing my second super. I run all deets. My second super is already on there for their brood box. And by that time, our privet, which is our first main blood privet, blackberry, that's coming in, and the bees, they're just grabbing this stuff and bringing it in. And our hives are really growing. Occasionally, I have one year, I did get a honey flow. I harvested honey from our privet, but normally the privet comes in, and that's a buildup for the hives, because once April, May comes on, I'm throwing my third super on, my honey super on. It'll be there in May, and then mid-May, end of June, our privet is now, it's that bloom is over. And for us down here, the big thing is the Chinese tallow. That bloom is coming on. And that bloom is from middle of May, end of May, towards the end of June. So you get about 3 weeks of the Chinese tallow and about 3 weeks of the privet. So really a 6-week window is all I have to make my honey. And it's got to be from May to June. So that's it. If I don't have my bees built up by the beginning of May, I'm not going to get honey. So by May, I've got 3 supers on my boxes, and I'm I'm counting my chickens already. I know I'm gonna get honey off these girls. So that's basically the only beekeeping I do. I make splits and then I pull honey. And that's it. That's my beekeeping knowledge.
Jeff, can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Jeff, when you do your splits, this is Eric, I'm just curious, how many frames do you like to see in your splits if you're making them in March?
When I it's I don't have any science. I just gauge the growth of the bees is how I do it. When I do my splits, it's beginning in February. I'm doing my splits mid-February. Almost immediately when I do the split, and I basically do, it's a walk-away split, but it's a modified walk-away because I'm either dropping queen cells in there. That's what I'm doing. I'm dropping queen cells in there. If what makes the determination of whether I'm going to use queen cells is when I open up that box, and again, it's going to have 2 deep supers on it. When I open the cover, the telescoping cover, pop the inner cover, and I look on that top box. If I've got in that second box at least 6 frames of bees in that box and about 6 frames of bees in the bottom of it, I can make a split. And if I have that condition, but usually when I open up that inner cover, I'm going to have 8 or 10 frames of bees in the top and 8 or 10 frames of bees in the bottom, because our bees build up so fast. And all of our bees at the Abbey, they're just Heinz 57. They're all mongrel bees. There's no special bees other than they're bees that I pulled from removals, swarms, or our splits. And they do all have that characteristic of that survival characteristic, that genetic, the survival. Because all the weakened ones, they're going to die out, which is good. I don't mind that. That's why I don't mind the losses, because it's good. Because I'm getting rid of the genetics that I'm not interested in, and I'm focusing on maintaining the genetics that I do want to propagate in our yards. So I'm telling you, by mid-March, the bees, if I hadn't split them already, they're going to be swarming. So I've got to stay ahead of them, and that's why I'll always throw that 3rd super on. And that time frame from March to January, March, April, June to end of April, end of May, that's like the most hectic time for me, because I'm in my yards all the time checking so I don't get swarms. Now, I mean, I can't catch them all, but I feel pretty confident I get at least 85% of them, that they don't swarm, because I'm staying ahead of them. And we have right now, we're probably at about somewhere between 140 and 180 hives. I don't know how many. It's somewhere in that range. I want to be at about 130. That's really what I want to be, because at 130 hives, I figure that I'm going to pull at least 80 boxes of honey off of 130 hives, because not all of them are going to give me honey. And not all of my bees are going to be able, they won't be able to split. But I have found that bees, the ones that are slower in growing, that I wasn't able to split, because the number of bees are so much in that, if I do throw that honey super on, I did this year, I'll be able to get honey off them. And I think I did probably about somewhere between 15 and 25 hives that I didn't split this year, that I bet I got at least 10 boxes of honey off of those 15, 25 hives in there. So I'm not, if my hives aren't big enough to split, that's okay with me too. That's, I'll just throw another super on it and let it go. In fact, Mike Barry was the one who suggested that method to me, and I've been doing it now. This is the 2nd year I did it, and it works. your hive isn't big enough to split, don't. Just let it grow and throw that honey super on it. You gotta, it is a chance that it will swarm, because if you don't get that, give them enough room, they can swarm. But if you stay ahead of them, they'll make you honey. So it's a great method, risky, but it's all, life is full of risks. So what the heck, take the roll of the dice and go for it. Come on,
So-
questions?
So you, just to be clear, I'm sorry to bang on this point, but you're saying if you have at least a total of 12 frames, deep frames full of bees in February, March, you're gonna split that in two. If you
Right.
have it cram packed, so it's like 20 frames, you're still gonna split it just in two, or will you split that one into three?
Now, I'm interested in honey production, so I want as many bees in my boxes as I can without them swarming. I'm not interested in raising bees. I want bees in my boxes so that we can get honey, and that's one of the things you really have to be clear on in your philosophy. What do you want to do with your bees? Do you want honey? You want to grow bees? Do you want to do both? It's what you want to do, how much work you want to do. Me, all I want, the whole goal is for us to have honey in the Abbey gift shop all year round. To do that, if I harvest anywhere from 300 to 400 gallons of honey, I've met my goal. And so this year we did 350 gallons. So that's good. I'm right there where I want to be. So, and we did that. It was, we harvested 350 gallons with 95 boxes, and they weren't all full boxes, but still. So with 95 boxes that we processed, we wound up with 350 gallons of honey. So that's not too shabby. The average is about 4 gallons per box. So let's see, it's 95 times 4 is 20, 28, 300, it's just a little over 300 gallons, and we did 350 gallons. So we got a little bit more than 4 gallons per box. Not bad.
This is so Duncan. Here, can you hear me out? This is
Yeah.
so Duncan. When you're splitting, if I remember watching videos, where some of us split, we pull frames out and put them in hoops. You literally take the box and separate them. The top and
Again,
bottom box.
again, you need to have an idea of what you're comfortable doing. There's nothing wrong with pulling frames to make your split. I'm lazy. I just look at my bees in the box. If it's by the end of March, if I open that box and I've only got 6 frames of bees on the top and the bottom box, I'm going to leave that box alone. If I open up that box at the beginning of March and I've got 8 frames of bees in both those boxes, I'm going to take that top box and move it off, because my queen, 95% of the time, she's going to be in that top box. I'm going to move that off. I'm either going to allow them to draw emergency cells in that, or I'm going to drop a swarm cell in that. But either way, if I don't drop a swarm cell, I'll mark it. I'll come back to make sure I've got emergency cells in there later, and I go on. Once I got emergency cells in that box, I'm going to throw another super on it, and they'll be all set to go. When that queen comes out, it'll all be good. Now, one advantage that I have over a lot of people is that when we harvest our honey at the end of June, July, beginning of July, once the honey has been removed from the comb, I will then store my comb, and I store the comb, but I only store comb that had honey in it. It can't have any any brood in it, or it can't have significant amount of pollen stored in it, because if there's brood or pollen in that comb, the wax moth will attack it. And so I take all of my honey supers that I harvest that are strictly for honey in it, and I store those. When I do my splits in March or April or February, in that time frame, I'm gonna almost immediately after what I do is I split everything. Everything's got one box on it, and then I just load up my truck, the trailer, and I go around and I start adding all these drawn comb supers on top of these splits that I've got. So they got to go in there, fix it up a little bit, but they've already got drawn comb. They're already way ahead of the game as far as that goes. And within 3 weeks of having that second super with that drawn comb in there, my queen is already in there laying in that top box. So she's in there doing her thing, and the bees are doing theirs. They're making the stores of honey, pollen, queen's laying her eggs, the hive is rolling. And I've got enough room in there. I don't have to worry about them swarming. And that's a good feeling that you don't have to worry about your bees swarming. But then once you get to the end of March, then I start worrying about swarming again. You just have to keep on them to make sure they don't swarm and keep adding boxes. I had probably about at least 3. Yeah, it was 3 of my hives. Like I said, I only run deeps. 3 of my hives had 5 deep supers on them this year. And it's just a matter of keeping ahead of them. And so I'm pulling 10 gallons of honey off of one hive. I mean, that's awesome, you know?
Now, you want to give folks a little background of how you kind of got started there at the Abbey with the bees?
Well, so the story of me keeping bees for the monks was one that that one of the monks had decided that he wanted to keep bees as his hobby. Our monks have hobbies, and they're allowed to choose a hobby or two, and then they pursue them. And so this one junior monk, he said, well, I want to keep bees. And the abbot agreed for that. And so he asked me if I would help him start the bees and do it. So we got 3 hives. I bought them. They packaged bees, and I would never, ever, ever recommend buying packaged bees. That's to me is the worst thing you can do to acquire bees. But I did it, and we bought 3 packaged bees, and I think that one of them definitely died, and another one may have died, but we either had 1 or 2 of them. And after about 4 months of having the bees, that monk decided he didn't want to be a monk anymore, and he left. So they asked us, so Jeff, you want to continue doing this? I said, yeah, I don't mind. It's few beehives, I can do that. And so those 1 or 2 hives over the next 3 years grew to about 18, 20, something like that. I really don't remember. And there was never any concept of what direction this hobby was going to go, whether it was just going to be hobbies so that the monks could have honey in their refectory, where they eat, or it's just no plan. They just had bees, and the monks traditionally, monasteries have kept bees for over 1,500 years. So it's a very monastic tradition to keep bees. So it's not unusual. And at St. Joseph Abbey, there over the years, there's probably been at least 4 different monks over those years that have started bees and got out of it and started again, got back in. And so this was just another episode of that. And most of the monks figured that's just what's going to be. So, but it grew to about 18, 20 hives, something like that. And in 2016, the Abbey had experienced a 500-year flood. That there was not a single building on the campus. The campus is about a 63-acre facility, and not a single building did not have water in it. The water was in some areas 5 foot deep in the fields, But generally it was about 3 foot deep. Um, the honey house had about 2 foot of water in it. So, and I was on the outside, so that I didn't have as much in there. But the effect of the flood was that it washed all the beehives down into the woods. And I've got videos on that showing, the effects of what happened. And I tried to get save some of those bees, but as it turned out, once the comb gets saturated wet, the bees never recovered from it. So we lost everything. And so at that point, I said, well, I could definitely bow out of this thing or not. And I said, nah, I really did start to like it. And I had equipment already. And I said, let's go again at it. So I went, and at that point, that's when I started to do bee removal from people's houses, catching swarms. And that's how my YouTube channel began, was start videoing what I'm doing. And so we grew from, in 2016 to where we had 0 to, well, last year we were at about 160, something like that. I don't know. But we were up to about 220 in 2021. So that was way too much. That year we harvested 6,200 pounds of honey that year. That's too much. So I don't need that much. So, and that's really how it started. And now I'm still the main guy there. I have Good Time Charlie, helps me all the time. Wreck-It Ralph, he's there a lot. And then there's always an endless supply of volunteers once we do our harvesting. Once the hard work is in, everybody wants to get in on the fun part of harvesting honey. And our honey shop, our house, we've got some pretty good equipment in it. It's not a line equipment, it's all separate individual equipment. I've got a Dakota uncapper, it's a chain uncapper, and that goes into a uncapping tank. And then I have a 48 frame man lake extractor. And then we pump everything into drums when we extract the honey. And then I'll come back about 3 or 4 days later, and I'll skim all the wax off the drums, throw it in the honey wax separator, spin it out, and then I process all the wax. I render the wax, and I have videos on all of that stuff. I mean, I do it every year. I love doing that part, and it's a great thing. So that's how when I was first doing that, doing the bees before we had the honey house, I had equipment in about 7 different buildings at the Abbey, and then we built the honey house in about 2015. It wasn't equipped when the flood came in 2016. The building was there, but there was nothing in it, and so there wasn't that much damage to it. The sheetrock wasn't even in it, and so clean that up, set that all up. And if you go to my YouTube channel and want to see how we process our honey at the Abbey, there's at least 5 different videos on that. I've even got some in the early years when we were uncapping honey in the wood shop and spinning it out. I had a 918 man lake extractor at that point, and we were uncapping by hand. It was rough, primitive, but it worked. And so that's the history on the beekeeping at the Abbey.
You still
How many of y'all follow my channel or know who I am? Oh, that's not bad. And who's the guy with the big beard back there?
That's you.
Yeah, the orange shirt.
Call me Orange Hat Pat.
Orange hat Pat.
So on your, do you ever comment on the channel?
I think I have a couple of times.
And what do you go by on that?
Well, that is my wife's name, Kimberly.
You want to be incognito? You mean with a good looking beard like that, you want to be incognito?
Well, it's like, if I get time to go from my YouTube channel to your YouTube channel. So it's-
I can't hear what you're saying.
I have time to go from my YouTube channel to my wife's YouTube channel.
Your wife's YouTube channel. Yeah, and on your YouTube channel, that's your wife's YouTube channel. Do you do bees on it?
Uh, Not yet, I've done some other things.
Okay. Yeah, YouTube it's a wonderful tool, you know, and it's to me, you might not believe it, but you know, on my channel and all, I kind of seem real extroverted and all, but really, I'm a quiet guy. And I do cherish my the silence, and it really was true. I mean, I discerned being a monk for almost 15 years that I really thought I was going to be a monk until Mona said, "No, you need to marry me." So that kind of changed those plans for the better. God's in charge, and he really was a driving force on it.
I have a question for you.
Oh, great.
You said you did a split, and it sounded like you just took your boxes and just split them in half. And
Yes.
Split.
That, if you have enough bees in there to do it. So the minimal amount of bees in there, when I do that, is like, it's got to be 6, but I like 8 in those boxes.
Okay, what I want to know is where you locate them. Do you set the boxes side by side and face the entrances, or do you take one away, or where do you?
Right, you can put them right next to each other. It doesn't matter. And the theory behind taking the top box, which hopefully, and most of the time our queen is in it. The theory behind it is when you take that box and you move it off of that hive, because the idea is you want to take your queen and move her away from that hive. And the reason you want to do that is because you want to take all of her field bees in that box and you want them to go back to the original hive. And the reason you want those, this is how I understand it to be, the reason you want those field bees to come back to the original hive is to, in a sense, demoralize our queen, because she's wondering, where the heck did all my workers go? And all she's got is hive bees. And so what happens, she's without workers, but she's going to continue laying. She's going to catch up because all her hive bees are going to graduate. They're going to become field bees, and they're going to be able to take over the load that the other field bees left behind. Maybe not for a week or two, but they'll be able to do it. They'll catch up. But the hive that you took the queen off of, they're going to get a swelling up of worker bees. So you need to have another super on that, because they're going to be storing nectar over the next 40 days that it's going to take for them to get a new queen and for her to start laying. So it's 40 days that nothing is going on in that box except bees bringing in nectar. So that the honey will grow in that one, but the honey won't grow in the other one. The bees will grow in that. But then the old queen, that box catches up and always, in my experience, surpasses the new one, because she's been laying and these bees are developing faster than the ones that you took off. So I always say my old queen is going to be where my honey is coming from. That's why when your bees swarm, it's always going to be the old queen that leaves. And I say that when that hive swarms, there goes your honey, because there goes your old queen. And a lot of times that old queen will be superseded very shortly after they get going. So she might be superseded by September. They might supersede that queen. And I love that when you get a queen that's superseded like in September, because that means that that queen's going to go through the winter. She'll go through that fall flow, that fall nectar flow. She'll be laying, and in a sense, she'll get all her bubbles out of her butt. And come springtime, boy, she is going to be laying strong. Her pattern is going to be beautiful. Instead of a spotty pattern, it's going to be really nice, tight, and full. So I love late season queens. I'm not worried about honey at that point. I'm already thinking about the honey for the following year at that point. September, that's what I'm thinking about. And that's how my mind thinks about it. There is another way that I was taught, and it is almost foolproof in doing a split without pulling frames out and going through and balancing the hive. And that's using a double screen dividing board. And I've got several videos on how to do it, what it is. And basically it's just a board that you have screens on both the top and the bottom of it. And then you have an entrance for it. And when I get a hive that isn't big enough to split, if it's got 6 frames, if it's only got 6 frames, I'm not going to do anything to it. If it's got 8 frames in each box and I don't have any swarm cells to drop in it, and I don't want to wait for another swarm cell, I'll drop a double screen dividing board in between those 2 boxes. In 10 days, I go back in and I put the screen board between the 2 boxes. The top box has got the old queen in it. All those field bees, they're going to leave that hive. The entrance is facing the opposite of where the regular hive is. So you have one entrance to the back, which is the new one, and the one to the front, which is the old one. The board is between it. The hive bees are going to leave that top box, and they're going to come back and they're going to go down into the bottom box. And so we're going to rob our field bees. They're going to go down to the bottom box. In 10 days, I'll pull that top box off, go into that second box to make sure I've got emergency cells down in that second box. At that point, I'll move my old queen off of the top box, move that to another stand, and add supers to both of them. Now, if the old queen happened to be in the bottom of the bottom box, and there wasn't nothing in the top box, you might have the queen in the bottom and emergency cells in the top. I still move the old queen off, drop the other one down to the bottom, and my field bees are still going to be returning to the old location. If when you do the split and there is no emergency cells in that bottom box, you can just remove the double screen dividing board and rejoin the colony, because they're still sharing that same pheromone. And at that point, I wouldn't do anything else to them, because I'm going to throw another honey super on and get honey from them that way. Because at that point, it's too late for me to make a split. So I'm always, again, thinking about the honey. So did that answer the question?
Yes. Yes.
And I've got videos on double screen dividing boards. You know, that's probably the name of the video. And it shows how I do it, and how to do it, and going back and then showing the emergency cells. You know what emergency cells are?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go back and there's different schools of thought on types of cells. There's 3 types of cells. You have the swarm cell, a superseding, and emergency cells. Those are the 3 type of queen cells they have. And there's always the thought is that an emergency cell is generally considered inferior, inferior to a superseding or a swarm cell. Swarm cells and superseding cells both were made by the bees, and the queen laid the egg in those cells. Whereas an emergency cell there was an egg already in the cell, a 1, 2, or 3 day-old egg, and the bees knew they had to have a queen because something happened to her, that they will then form a cell around that cell to draw that cell out. And so the theory is that because the queen didn't lay the egg in there, or because the egg wasn't a 1 day or 2 day or 3 day, it was too old of an egg, that the developing queen, in a sense, would be inferior. But I have seen some beautiful, beautiful emergency cells queen emerge from those cells. And it's like, I couldn't believe how big the queen was when she came out. Now, I've seen some runts come out as well, but I've seen some beautiful ones come out also. So the idea of emergency cells, they're inferior, the queen's inferior. It may be so, but even if she is inferior, the bees will supersede that queen. They'll get her, she'll start laying, and when they figure out she's not the one they need, they're going to get her to lay a superseding cell, and she's out of there. So I'm okay with emergency cells, but I prefer superseding and swarm cells to make my splits. It's just the way I like to do it, because if you have those cells present, you're gaining 10 days. 10 days is a lot in honey production. So if I can drop a cell in there, that's already, I'm gaining 10 days, because they don't have to draw the cell out, wait for her to emerge. So I'm gaining that, which is why so many people love to rear their own queens, because they can drop these queen cells in their hives. And that works. It works. A lot of people do that. I still kind of want to do it, but then that would mean I'd have to learn how to do queen rearing, and I'll keep the way I'm doing it right now.
Jeff, this is Eric again. What's your position on feeding sugar? Do you feed any sugar throughout the year?
I don't feed sugar. It just, there's nothing wrong with it. The bees, they got to do it. They got to do it on their own. If they didn't get enough honey when the honey was there to get, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in it. They can move on. Now, but that's just me. If you want to baby your bees, make them welfare bees, go for it. That's fine. I don't have any problem with that. Now, I will, like, when I do removals, particularly, at this time of year, and I love doing removals at this time of year, because you see that dropping off of the number of bees, and you also see the amount of honey in the hive dropping off too, because there's still a lot of bees in the hive. They got to eat. We're not in a flow, so they're eating their resources. So I like doing bee removals at this time of year. The thing is that no matter what amount of honey I take out of that hive, I've got to give it back to those bees. And sometimes that will require me to take that honey. Sometimes it won't fit in frames. And so at that time, I've got to crush it and strain it, and then I'll feed it back to them. But I feed them honey. I don't feed them sugar water. I'd rather give them, I don't need any honey, so I'd rather give it back to them, give them back their honey. So I do not feed bees sugar. It's just not what I'm going to do. But if you want to do it, I say go for it. That they're your bees. You need to take care of your bees. You're the steward, so it's your job.
Very good. You have a question? Okay, go ahead. We'll put Eric on the spot to ask him a question.
Oh, good, good.
Do you use any special equipment to have those, full, deeps full of honey?
Say it again?
A deep full of honey, you said you ran all deeps, a deep full of
Oh.
honey can get pretty heavy, I'm curious if you.
Oh,
use any,
yeah, that's
special equipment.
yeah, that's the drawback of running deep supers. But in my way of thinking, I also I also don't use queen excluders. And so you always have the chance of our queen getting up into your honey box and your honey super and laying in that brand new beautiful comb up there because she likes to do it. Generally speaking, that by the time I throw that third super on there, the bees have already got a nice dome of honey in that second box. And our queen, she doesn't like to travel across honey. So why put an excluder in there when it's really going to be more work for me, more work for the bees? And since I'm running all deeps, if my queen should happen to get up in that top box and lay in there, all I do, and I check this. This is how when I open up my honey supers, the first thing I do is I'll pop that center frames, the 2 center frames. If I've got brood in there, what I do is I'll pull that box off, and then I'll go into the second super and I'll pull the outside frames, because the outside frames in that second super, they're going to have honey in them. They're going to be all honey, and I'll just swap my frames up. That's what I do. Now, a lot of times, if our queen gets up in there and lays, the nectar is coming in so fast that once that first brood hatches, 3 weeks, those bees will push that queen out of there, and then they'll backfill all those cells with honey. And that's what I was talking about earlier, that I can't use the frames that had brood laid in them, store them. I can't store those. Those frames are separated out as we extract our honey. Any frame that had brood in it or pollen in it, they're set aside, because those frames, I simply scrape those off. I clean the foundation, and then I re-wax all that stuff, and I melt the wax that I scraped off. And it's a really, it works for me. That way works for me, but we still have to deal with that weight. Those honey supers can weigh anywhere from 70 to 90 pounds for one of those deep supers. That's definitely a 2-man job. And me and Charlie, I'm 66, Charlie is 72. We don't have a lot of juice left in us. And we start early. We would start about 5 o'clock in the morning. By 9 o'clock, we're done. We can't do any more. And we'll go the next day. And it generally takes us 4 to 5 days to go to our yards and pull our supers. You know, we're pulling 15, 16 boxes a day. And I'm telling you, after 16 boxes like that, you're wore out. At least I am. And we do have videos of us doing that stuff too. Charlie and I, we have a lot of fun doing that. And I'm really blessed to have such a good friend like Charlie, and that he doesn't have a life, that he wants to come hang out and work bees with me anytime I want.
What kind of foundation do you like to use?
For years, I used the stuff that Man Lake sold, but you know, it's just my opinion. Man Lake, their whole philosophy has changed over the years, and I really don't buy any equipment from Man Lake anymore. And so I started using Acorn products, and it used to be, I believe it was Perico originally, and then Acorn bought that out, and they used that foundation, the plastic foundation. I I don't use natural. I don't let them draw their own. And Acorn products were at least a third less expensive than Man Lake. And I think their product was just better anyway. So I use that. Now, this year, I also experimented with, oh, he's going to kill me. I can't remember. There's another one that I tried, and his foundation was pretty good as well. But I've really, at this point, I've got enough equipment that I can clean all my foundation out, pressure wash it, let it dry. My frames, they're all good. So I just re-wax my foundation, and I've got plenty of videos showing how I do that process. I render all my wax down, and once it's clean, I melt it again, and I take my plastic foundation. I have a big kitchen kettle. It's a 30-gallon kettle, and I just take those plastic foundation. I dip it in that wax water mixture, pull it up, shake it, boom. My foundation is now completely covered both sides with wax. Drop that in my frame. Those bees within a week, they'll draw that comb out. It's beautiful, and they'll start filling it up. I'm always my theory is that I'd rather give the bees the wax instead of having them produce it. My theory for that is it takes what I've been told 7 gallons of honey, 7 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So when I give the bees the wax, I'm actually reaping the honey from it. So that's why I do it. And the other reason is because time. If that wax is already on there, they don't have to produce it. It's there. They just simply draw it out on the foundation, and man, you rock it and roll it. You would not believe how fast a hive can grow when you give them their foundation drawn out. That's the way to do it. If you can do it, that's the way you should do it, in my opinion.
Hello. We are beekeeping super beginners, and we were wondering if you had any videos of your own or any like fellow YouTubers that you would recommend.
I didn't quite hear that last part.
Do you have any YouTube videos of your own, like for beginners, that you recommend, or any other people who have done videos or resources just for beginners?
You know, Bob Vinny is a great beekeeper. I would look into Bob Vinny. I know he's got a lot of videos on keeping bees in particular, and he's very knowledgeable on it. I don't have a lot of knowledge about bees other than what I observe, and it's enough for me. That's all I need to know. So I don't read about keeping bees. What I've picked up, I've done through my own mistakes and observations. It is, I would recommend that you try to follow somebody who lives in a climate zone similar to yours, because that's really important. You don't really want to learn how to keep bees from somebody who lives in Louisiana if you're keeping bees in Kansas, because the forage, everything is different. How to do that is different. So you need to, another good guy is JC Bees. I like JC Bees too. And he does a lot of, he's cold weather, he's in Ohio. Bob Binney, I think, is in Georgia. So, you know, there are some guys, good people out there that know their stuff, that you don't have to worry about what they're saying is accurate. And that's one reason I don't do a lot of those videos, is because it works for me here in Southeast Louisiana. Now, the way I do splits, that could work for anybody, but the timing of the splits, you know, you have to adjust to where you live at. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, good, good.
Okay, Jeff, I'm gonna put together a few pieces of information you gave us. You said your bees fly almost every day of the year.
Yes,
You said you don't feed any sugar,
no,
and you said you harvest an awful lot of honey from your colonies. So how much honey do you leave on your colonies if your window of making honey is only 3 to 6 weeks long, about 6 weeks long, and your bees are active all year round? How much honey do you leave in your hive?
there's about, and it varies. The minimum amount would be 40 pounds. But our hives, they're heavy, man. I'm 60, 70 pounds are in there. I never pull honey out of my second box other than to flip frames around. And I'm doing that when there's still a flow. So I never go into my second box to take any of that honey. The two brood boxes, the two boxes that are on my brood box, the bottom and top one, that all the resources in that box belongs to the bees for the winter. And last year, well, I mean, we still had losses, but it was due to some other thing, because even when I opened up those boxes that had loss in them, there was still honey in them. So it wasn't that they starved. I haven't had starve outs in my hives in probably 7 years. That when I opened the box, I saw butts. I haven't seen that. And yeah, if the hive, the way I check, all I do is I go behind that box and I just lift. If I can't lift it up, man, that box is good. And I'm not worried about that thing. And I'll do that about November. I'll go looking at stuff like that. And then if they're questionable, well, I'm still not going to feed them. I'm not going to feed them because they should have done what they needed to do. But I'm not worried about it because I know all the ones I've looked at so far, which is all of them, they're heavy boxes. They're heavy.
Do you store any drawn comb?
Oh, I store a lot of drawn. You said drawn, right?
Drawn comb, yeah. And if you do, what do you store them on Paramount, or is there a way you like to store drawn comb?
Oh no, I don't do any kind of drone comb. Not at all. I don't put any green frames in there. I'm not worried about the roar. I mean, it's part of life of keeping bees. I'm always checking when I'm doing my splits. When you break that bridge comb that's in there and you're looking at the drones that are in there, I'm always looking at that. And it's rare for me to find a mite in there at that time. Now, I'm not saying we don't have mites, we have mites. But the severity of them is not like it is in other parts of the country. Yeah, we have mites, but that deformed wing disease, I've never seen that in our yards, never. And that's since I've been doing this. So, I mean, know it's out there. I know it's there, but I haven't seen it. Nor have I seen, like, I've never seen foul brood. I've never seen it. We have terrible hive beetles. That's the hive beetles. Again, I don't do anything to take that problem away from the bees. The bees have to take care of that. But what I do for the bees is I do not go into the box, because what the bees do is there's certain bees in that hive, their job is to take care of corralling these beetles. And they push these beetles, they manipulate them, they put them where they need to put them. And generally they're going to be on the top of the frames is where they're going to make them go. they're going to get them off of the cone and they're going to shove them up to the top. And then when they're on the top, then they start propylizing that space between your covers and the top of that frame. They'll start propylizing that. And the beetles are trapped in there. And I've shown this on plenty of my videos. They call them corrals, that the beetles are in there and the bees propylize the beetles in that area. And then they starve them. They close it, seal it, and they'll starve them out. The only way those beetles can get out of that is if you go into your hive or I go into my hive, pop that inner cover, whoop, and release those beetles. And then they go back into the hive. They have to start over. So the way I consider I help the bees is I don't go into the box. I don't go into them. I'm not gonna pop that inner cover because I know what's under it is the beetles. And the bees have worked hard enough to corral them. And if they're not underneath that cover, they push them through that hole on the inner cover and they're all on top of the inner cover. And when I lift that top lid off, and sometimes I've seen literally hundreds of beetles up there, and I get my hive tool and I start going to town, killing them. I don't do anything for anything. And that one of the, I think it's comical that people say, oh, the wax moth got my bees. The wax moth, they didn't get your bees. They certainly did finish off the hive. But if a hive is strong enough, it's going to take care of its needs. It's not going to let the wax moth overrun it. They will push it out. They will kill it. They will get rid of it. They're not going to let the wax moth overrun the hive. Now, beetles are another story. I've had super strong hives that the beetles, they were too many and they hatched out and they just overcame the bees and boom, the bees abscond. And you just got a sticky, runny mess. Wax moth, the guy that mentored me said, the wax moth are morticians. They put the hive away. It was already gone. And the wax moth just finished it off.
So I'm curious, I've watched a lot of different YouTubers. You seem kind of unique and you've got quite a few friends that you give a hard time to. So I'm just curious how such a camaraderie got built up. Are there just an abundance of beekeepers or?
Well, you know,
it's again to just breed characters.
Yeah, I definitely think it's got something to do with living in the South. Just our upbringing. We're all open, very open. We're friendly, and the truth is, I started keeping bees by watching YouTube, and I first followed JP. That's another guy. JP is like, to me, the best of bee removal. He's the best in my opinion. He doesn't wear a bee suit. He's got just this way of wrangling bees. I've always respected the way JP does his deal. And when I first started, I contacted JP and he was receptive to me. Don't ask me why. I think that we're all receptive to people serious inquiries about bees, that, you know, if you can detect that sincerity, that they'll want to help you. And JP, that's how I met JP. I called him up and I started talking to him. And it's how I met the Dirt Rooster. I called him up, talked to him. Well, Mike Barrier and Charlie and Ralph, we all were in the same bee club. Like the Dish Man, Cayman Reynolds, all these guys I've known because of my association with YouTube, that, I don't know, we reach out to each other and we talk. And that's why you see that friendship, that closeness between us, because we all share the same love of bees. And for most of us, we all love having fun, and we like picking on each other and making fun of each other. And we don't do, there's no meanness in it. It's just fun. And if you, we all laugh at ourselves, and that's, you have to have that quality. You can't have thin skin and be a beekeeper, because it stings, you know?
Well, Jeff, we want to be respectful of your time. We've been going now for about an hour and 15 minutes. Did anybody else have any other questions before we wrap up? Oh, yeah, okay.
Jeff, you mentioned JP and some of the others. I looked at the roster of the presenters at the Hive Live conference.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of YouTube all-stars in there for people.
Well, you see, Cayman is smart. Cayman is smart because he's asked all of us to come to the Hive Live, and the fact that he knows that people will go there because we're going there, you know, and he's using us, and I say more power to him, because it's really, all of us want to go, because not all of us. I've yet to meet Fred Dunn, yet I talked to Fred Dunn. I've yet to meet Bob Benny, yet, you know, I know Bob Benny. I've yet to meet Ian from the Canadian Bee Blog guy. You know, this is a great opportunity for all of us YouTuber guys to come together and cut up and really have a lot of fun too. So Cayman really, it was a great idea for him to do this, and we're all on board with it. We're all in favor of it.
I'm looking forward to the Thursday night meet and greet.
Me too. we're all, in fact, from what I understand, we're all going to be getting there a day early. We'll be getting there Wednesday, just so we get more time to cut up.
Oh, geez. I'm sure that place can handle like that.
No, it's going to be bad. They'll probably have to have extra security.
I appreciate when I talked to you this spring and I mentioned something about our club doing stuff, and you offered up right at the very beginning. Hey, I'd be glad to talk to you guys. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
You being quiet and stuff. You were very outgoing out there when we met up with you. It's like you're real. So I really appreciate that.
look, it all stems from my faith in God. You know, it all comes from that. He's the source of my happiness, my joy, my everything. And so from that is communicated that joy. And it's what I hope to portray. When people see me, they see me, but I want you to see God and Christ in me. And I try very hard for that image to be projected really on top. And then, you know, what people see, it's just this face, this image. But I'm really hoping that y'all see God. That's what I hope.
Well, let's just appreciate it. Oh, by the way, hold up your left hand. I want to congratulate you. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we got married on the 13th of last month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was
Everything is set. So have a great one. And I'm going to turn it back to Eric.
okay.
Take care. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.
Well, thanks again for your time, Jeff. We certainly appreciate, you've been very generous. Without any other questions, I think we'll just let you sign off, unless you want to listen to a repeat business conversation for this. But thanks again. Maybe we'll get an applause for Jeff.
Thank you so much. Thank y'all for spending the time with me today. I do appreciate that. And leave a comment on the videos that you know you were at the Zoom, and let me know who you were. I would like to see that.
We're nominating you for president.
I'm
I'm not
Take my job.
interested in the job. Trust me. I'm not interested. All right, guys. God bless. Thank y'all very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Okay.